Welcome back to the channel. It's Mark from Powersonic and Apprentice 121. Today is a really exciting day. We have got our ICS hybrid inverter and battery storage system on the wall and ready to go. So before we get into this, I want to say a massive thank you to ICS for providing us with this here. It's going to be a great resource for people to learn at the cutting edge of technology what the renewable industry is all about. We've got our solar PV roof just up there, and we have now got a market leading inverter and battery system for people to come and practice on and make use of. As part of that, I want to show the features of these products and exactly the benefits they can bring to us as installers and consumers. So let's get straight to the video and find out exactly what this is all about. So we can see on the side of the inverter it comes with a list of all of the outputs that this thing can do. So this is the 5 kilowatt inverter, but it has a PV peak of 7 kilowatts. Its input voltage range for the MPPTs is 125 to 500 volts, which is why inside here at Apprentice 121 it's going to be tricky to get this to start using the solar generation because we've only got about 80 volts or so coming off that and we're indoors, so it's never really going to manifest into a usable voltage and current. But this will do up to 14 amps for the PV current and an ISC of 17.5. It will put out 5 kVA, 21.7 amps, and then again when you're in the backup mode it replicates that precisely the same, so you still get the same 21.7 amps. This will work with lead acid or lithium batteries that have a voltage range of 40 to 58 volts. Its maximum charging current is 95 amps and its maximum discharge current is 104.2 amps. It is IP65 and it weighs 25 kilos and is 95% efficient. So we have this handy marketing sheet that ICS have kindly provided us with, and it takes us through these products. As I said on the EV charge point we installed the other week that we've got in the booths just over there, this system all links together, so it is an ecosystem. You can use the solar generation to go straight into your electric vehicle and set it all up through the battery storage and inverter as well, which is really, really nice. You can see you're taking the solar and the grid energy through the inverter and then into your household and EPS loads. So you can use the grid energy in that direction, and then also you've got the DC coupled battery which can be charged via the grid or the sunshine and then return energy back when one or both of those things are not present to power the house and the EPS loads. The batteries are capable of putting out fires themselves, which is absolutely amazing. So I'll pop a little video in after this segment here where you can watch that ICS tried very hard to force one of their batteries to ignite, removed the case, chopped it in half, messed about with the wiring, overcharged it, eventually got it to ignite, and it was really good to see that it did self-extinguish. So there's a lot of chatter around battery fires and people not understanding the difference between LiFePo4 batteries and lithium-ion of the older tech. So this is really good to see even further innovation in terms of safety. Full credit to ICS on that. These systems are scalable all the way up to 40.96 kilowatt hours. So if you need more battery capacity, you can stack these up on top of each other. So they do just sit nicely on top of each other. There is a white cover to go on top of here. I've just not fitted it at present. But you could have another battery underneath there. You could put some more to the side, which is fantastic. And likewise, the inverter, if you need more output power, you can stack these as well. I'm reliably informed by George from ICS that is a thing. So that's really, really useful to know as installers. And yeah, let's move on with the video.
So this is a little video presentation that ICS have put together around the fire suppression built into the battery. You can see they've removed the case, cut it apart, and made some modifications to try and ensure that this happens. As they say here, that LiFePo4 doesn't run away as traditional lithium-ion batteries could do, but in the rare situation it happens, it is nice to have this feature built in, and more so that a fire could eventually reach this battery from elsewhere in a property to know that it can extinguish itself. So you can see at the minute we've just got some smoke building that will eventually ignite, and that's when we know that the battery is entering into thermal runaway, and then it will activate the three-stage self-extinguishing modules within the battery to put that out. So we see we've still got quite a bit of smoke coming out. We've now got the ignition, so thermal runaway is taking place, and the fire suppression is now going to activate and put that out to make sure there is no damage beyond the local area of the battery itself, which is a very good to know feature built into this product. So now we are on with the installation itself, and I have to say the battery modules are significantly lighter than the ones we are used to from Solax. These weigh in at about 45 kilos, I think, as opposed to near enough 90 with the Solax batteries. So huge improvement. The inverter is 25 kilograms, and as you can see, it is a one-person lift if you are tough enough and get that onto the bracket that needs to be very securely mounted onto the wall. We've got some timber battens inside there, so the bracket is secured nicely. And then there's some fixing screws just to hold it onto there to ensure it can't be lifted up and knocked off onto the floor. So we make sure that's done up nice and tight and securely fastened. On the underside of the inverter, you've got your battery inputs, your PV inputs, the DC isolators, the communication ports, access to make your terminations through the cat cables for the CT and BMS, and then the EPS and grid connections. But we're going to start with the PV cabling, and we're going to use the LK kit again. This is the system we've been using for all of our MC4 terminations. The LK connectors and stripping and crimping tools are absolutely brilliant. So we've got those ready to go and fasten into the bottom of this inverter, starting with the positive coloured red. You can see that's popped up into there. And we're now going to do the negative one. You can see that's the LK crimping tool. Get the connector on there and tuck it up nicely underneath. We would normally bring the containment through and along so we can cover up lots of this cabling on the underside of the inverter. That's what we would be doing on a commercial install or a customer install, but we're not doing that in this case. You can see this panel needs removing so we can access the CAT terminals, so we can pop the data cable in, if you like, for the CT and the BMS. There is instructions within the manual to help you understand exactly which one of those is which, and you can refer to it and make sure you get those the right way around. Just a quick scoot along the underside so you can see exactly what is in there, and there are the instruction manuals with the layout of those CAT and USB ports within that compartment. So you can see Matthew's going to make off the grid and EPS cable in here. We've gone for some 6mm high tough, so he's ferruled the ends, and it was a bit of a tricky job. He wasn't too happy with me for selecting 6mm, but that's what I wanted, and that's what we've got. So they will go down into there, and they're Allen head bolts to fasten down onto the crimped cable, which you can see he's doing there. He's really enjoying himself, I think, while he's doing that. So that's going to be a nice, secure termination. He's as good at focusing the camera as I am. He's having more of a battle with that than the actual connector itself, I think. But you can see on there, we've got the Allen key head on those fixings, so we can get a nice, solid connection, because these can carry some considerable load for quite a long period. So they need to be good, solid sound connections. You see here he's got that wired in now to the actual plug on the end, and we need to bring the back body up and make sure that that is suitably fastened and connected, so we're not going to have an issue with any exposure to single insulated cables or, even worse, live parts. So he's getting that fastened up nicely onto the bottom of that gland. And once he's got it securely in place, we can pop that into the bottom of the inverter. And both the grid and the EPS plugs are exactly the same. They wire up in the same way. You just duplicate the process based on if you're going to use the EPS or not, I guess. You can see Matty's about got there now. He's got that fastened up. So this is essentially, if you're going to use this outside, you need to make sure you get it fastened correctly. And you can see he's having fun focusing again. But there we go, onto the bottom of the inverter now, straight in and screwed up, and that's it connected in the underside of the inverter. So that's the grid one anyway. As we move on with the video, you can see this is me mounting the battery to the wall. Now we do have timbers inside here just to screw the battery system onto, which is the option we've gone for in the end, but I wanted to demonstrate the mounting plate that comes with this, so you can use that template to make all your markings and ensure everything is in the right place. Comes with some battery interconnect cables which can pop onto the underside of the inverter. They just simply push on. They're really simple connectors, and you can see here for the minute I've just popped them straight onto the battery itself. However, we have got a DC MCB to fit in line between these a little bit later on in the video. See here we need to make off earth connections for both the inverter and the battery. It's important that this is done, so we're crimping on a lug to the end of there and connecting that into the earth terminal. Again, that's duplicated on the inverter itself, and they run off to the earth terminal supply in this equipment. So it's important that this is done just in case, in the worst circumstances, there is that reliable earth connection to the body casing of both these bits of equipment. So we're just getting that done and over and away onto there. This is closing up the cat ports, and as I said before, we're leaving the cables free and easy underneath this inverter. The idea being that people coming in and looking at it can see what's going from where to where. It's not so much making this a neat, tidy, aesthetic job as it would be in client premises. It is to try and train people in how this stuff works and operates, and leaving a bit of it visual made sense to me. We may revisit that and pop a bit of containment up underneath the inverter, depending on how this is utilised in the training space. You then pop the other end of the BMS cable into the battery, make sure you use the gland to seal it up in there, and then the cover plate goes on. Then there's a nice tidy front cover to fix over everything else. It simply screws into place. If you're stacking your batteries, they would sit on top of each other to make it look even neater. In this case, there is normally a white cover plate to go on the top, but I don't currently have one. Hopefully in the future we can add that on as well, just to neaten it all up. But this is an absolute doddle to get on the wall, I've got to say. There's nothing complex to it. It's really straightforward.
So while we're at this stage, I thought we'd have a run through the system again and see exactly what we've got. We've got the main inverter isolator here. This is obviously the emergency stop button, if you like, that's for the ProJoy to kill off the DC strings in the event of an emergency circumstance. The array comes down the conduit here, through the containment, up into the ProJoy. It then comes out of the ProJoy into this DC isolator, which has the test probes in the top. Now these have been handily positioned to measure the voltage off the strings. You can see the ISO is doing that right now. We've got 76 volts or so been shown. Now there are some cover caps on here as well, which we can place in to ensure they remain safe when we are in energized conditions with no test probes in, but it made a lot of sense for me to put that into place. Saves removing the covers all of the time, removing MC4 connectors to try and get measurements and such, an easy point to see exactly what is coming off those strings. It then comes out of that DC isolator and into the SPDs here. Now there is the dual SPDs because we are going to have another string somewhere else very soon, but just for the minute, only one of those has been used. And then the strings pop out into the bottom of the inverter, and you can see they pop in there. There's 2 ports on the bottom of there, so we can have another set of strings coming in, and we'll be using those shortly. There's the battery terminals. They clip in, as you will have seen through the course of the video. There is also the DC isolator on the bottom there. We've got the comms connection. There's this little plate here, as we've shown you in the time lapse, and that's where the CT and data comes in. I swapped these to separate colours so they're a little bit easier to identify. And then we've got the grid and EPS main power cables, and you can see there it's labelled on the back. We've sized these in 6mm high tough. It is a bit tricky getting the cables into these connectors, but once you've done one, the practice makes perfect for the second time around. We've then got the DC isolator here between the battery and inverter. Now, I actually asked for that in the instruction manual, so we've popped that into position. This is an 125 amp variety. So we can see in there, got 125 amp rating, and it served a dual purpose because we can put the gateway in here. So this is the device that connects to the internet to make all of this smart, and that then runs through that lead up into this comms port on the bottom of the inverter. And it was just somewhere to house that. Made sense, there's an extra space in there, and we've kind of kept the cabling underneath free and easy. We would normally take the containment across and then gland out, as those of you will have seen on some of the prior videos, but I thought as this is going to be coming on and off the wall a lot, and we want learners to understand where cables are running from A to B, we have popped the trunking up under here just to stop it being a total spaghetti mess of cabling clipped to the wall. But at this end, it made sense, and if anybody needs to, we can pop the trunking lid off and you can follow your cables from A to B, because sometimes seeing is believing and makes the penny drop in how these things are actually functioning. So that's the thought process behind that. And obviously up on the roof, there's the panels up there, as we've said already, and then the battery storage system happily blinking away down here because it is currently on charge from the grid, and we're about good to go. Let's move the video along and see what's up next. So that's us installed and ready to go now. We've got the system in place. Of course, I'm going to run through a full test sequence with the TIS instruments. So I've got the clamp meters here that we'll be using for measuring both the DC generation and energy that's transferring into the battery through the clamp meters that are built into those. So that comes in the PV200 kit, I think it is, from TIS. And you get a light measuring meter with that as well. And obviously this one I have shown on the channel a few times. It's the 9025 with the data logging feature that has built in is really, really nice. And obviously we've got the PV check now. So this is kind of the multi-function tester, if you like, for solar installers. It's pretty much got every test function baked into it. And it can also do some fault finding and such as well. And we're going to dig into these in more detail out on site. We've got one of these systems waiting to go into a customer property in the next few weeks. So once we're filming that, we'll get some footage out in the real world. This is the ISA test. Now, for those of you who watched some of the short form content, you'll have seen this already. So this can do your IR testing while there's up to 1500 volts present, which obviously with solar systems is going to be likely that there'll be voltage there, maybe not quite 1500 volts, but very often into the 500-600 volt region. And this can still carry out an insulation resistance test with that voltage present. And of course, last but not least, the MFT Pro Plus for all of the AC side of things when it comes to testing. So we need to remember, we've still got final circuits coming down to the inverter and also into this Pro Joy here we've got for the emergency activation. So we need to test all those things as we normally would. And it's also interesting to use this in the EPS socket I've got here to see if there is any issues with the earth and neutral bond relay when we go into EPS mode. So that's really interesting. And yeah, let's move on with the video and see how this all buttons up at the end with a little experiment thrown in. So I hope this footage is coming out okay. I might not include it because on the car charging one, it wasn't especially clear. And that's just due to trying to record a phone screen more than anything else. But you can see I've managed to get the gateway logged into the ICS 2.0 Lite app. We can see it all in there now. So we've got our connection point, the data that's going on. Obviously we're not really doing anything with this system at present. You can change its mode and you can change its operation. You see there it's in self-consume. There's a little drop down where you can choose a different operating mode if you want, and then you've got all the data presented inside the app and you can update the firmware through it as well. So you can see I've got a little gateway inside this distribution board, well, little enclosure down here, and that then runs off into the communication port on the bottom of the inverter to give us a connection out to the internet. So I think we've got this one about buttoned up, nice and complete. Let's move along with the video. So as you can see, the inverter is currently on. It has grid energy running into it, the battery is charging, and we also have electrical energy down to the EPS circuits. Now these would typically be wired through a consumer unit looking after such things as lights, freezers, alarms and critical devices as shown on the ICS marketing up there. But in this case we've got an even more important product. It is the kettle, because nobody wants a boiled kettle being interrupted by something so inconvenient as a power cut. So we're going to pop that on. So you can see we've got the energy running through now into the kettle and it's going to start to charge itself, as you can hear there. If I switch the inverter off, you can see that the power remains. It's still continuing to boil that kettle, and I'm not going to have to wait for a hot cup of tea or coffee just because the grid's gone down. We may as well make use of all of that vital stored energy to make sure the tea and coffee stays hot and the beer stays cold. They're the critical systems that we all need to worry about. And once the grid energy is restored, the inverter then simply starts using power from that place instead of out of the battery, and the kettle continues to charge. We'll turn that off because the noise is probably overwhelming the microphone, so apologies if that didn't come through. But it's just a good example of how this doesn't take seconds to switch over. I know from my system at home, when the grid drops out, there is a second or two delay before the EPS actually starts to output voltage. In this case, there is absolutely no delay whatsoever. So if you've got some critical equipment that you want to wire in through the EPS circuit, you can do that and still power those things even when the grid goes down. And the switchover time is in the millisecond range, so you know that you're not going to lose any of that important information if it's such a thing as a server or something that's critical to you working from home, whatever that may be. It is well covered with this product, and that was a really nice experiment to see that plays out as true, having had the good people of ICS tell me that is exactly what it should do. So thumbs up from me on that one. So I hope you've enjoyed running through this installation with me and seeing exactly how easy this is to get on the wall. I think it's a pretty straightforward system. We've been doing this between the day job and people coming in and using this facility over the last week or so, and pieced it all together, so you may have noticed some change of clothes along the way. It is just fitting it around the day job and apprentice one-to-one duties. I'm impressed with it. I think this is proper decent gear. It's pitched at an excellent value price point. I don't think you can really argue with it for the features you get with the app integration, the fact it can self-extinguish itself if there's an issue with fire. It has a wide temperature range in the way that this can operate in the environment it can be placed. You can use it outside if you want. ICS are happy for it to be used in a loft space as well. And it is also scalable. So the batteries can be stacked up to 40.96 kilowatt hours, and the inverters as well can also be stacked together. So if you want more power output in your property, you can use these inverters bulked up with each other to provide that, which is a really useful feature as well. Otherwise, if you've got any questions in and around this video, please do drop them in below. And until the next time, I'll see you then.